Now let's bring in great friend of the show, elections correspondent for the Federalist, Brianna Lyman. Brianna, first of all, were you ever the border czar?
I certainly was not. There's only one person here who
So this whole thing with Kamala and the border, we're going to get to that in a minute. But first of all, Kamala Harris has now launched her first campaign video. Let's have a look at this.
We each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? There are some people who think we should be a country of chaos, of fear, of hate. But us, we choose something different.
Brianna, first of all, I wanted to get your reaction to that ad. It goes on for about a minute and a half, and they're clearly trying to make it seem like they're the positive party, and it's mean old Trump, who's a big, negative, meanie, nasty type person. What did you think?
Yeah, I watched actually the entire video, and something she said that really stuck out is that, for instance, she wants to provide freedom from gun violence. And what she really means is she wants to take away a fundamental right that is laid out in our Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment. So that is literally the antithesis of American freedom. And yet she's trying to campaign on being the party of freedom and to cast Donald Trump as this hateful person, which is really unfortunate considering that he just survived an assassination attempt less than, 2 weeks ago. And it is her boss, Joe Biden, who said, let's tone down the rhetoric. They have ramped that rhetoric right back up. What did they think, that, stopping for a few days is going to change the temperature in the country? Absolutely not.
And what do you make of some of the messaging around Kamala Harris and female voters? She's clearly making a big pitch for those suburban voters. Do you think this is going to work?
No, and I think this is a bad leg to stand on for her. Look, Hillary Clinton, one of the reasons she lost is her campaign message was, I'm with her. Donald Trump was Make America Great Again. I'm with her was a very narcissistic campaign message, right? How could anybody who's not a female relate to I'm with her? Donald Trump's is about prosperity for all Americans, regardless of race, religion, sexuality, what have you. And with Kamala Harris, she's trying to win over a certain group of people, specifically college-educated suburban voters, who Donald Trump lost a bit in 2020. And that really made all the difference in a state like Georgia for Donald Trump, right outside the Atlanta suburbs. And so Kamala's not stupid. She knows that she needs to win over white college-educated suburban women. But I don't know if saying, I'm a woman, you should vote for me, is the way that's going to happen.
Yeah, and let's have a look at some of the polls. I mean, they seem to be bouncing all over the place here after this announcement, and you would expect that. You would expect there to be kind of a natural boost. Reuters even has Harris ahead of Trump by 2 points, 44-42, in a national race. But swing states seem to be still edging Trump's way. What do you make of the polls as you see them? And do you think they're going to sustain this bounce, when we come out of the Democrat National Convention?
No, and like you said, look, they went from, running a candidate who was like the Walking Dead to running someone who, stays up past 4 o'clock and doesn't trip over sandbags, right? So, of course, you're going to see this, revived sense of enthusiasm right now because Democrats, for the first time in, about 3 weeks, have something to rally around cohesively, and that is Kamala Harris. That being said, with the poll numbers, that Reuters poll, I believe, if I read that one correctly, they had a larger sample size of Democrats, so of course she's going to be up in the polls. Second, Hillary Clinton was, I think she had, a 90% chance of winning just days before the election, and she lost. So polls don't mean everything. And when it comes to these swing states, a state like Arizona, for example, the borders are Kamala Harris. She failed miserably. And Arizona is a border state. Those people, that is one of their top issues, if not their top issue, because they directly feel the consequences. I'm in New York. I feel the impact of the border crisis, but I don't feel it the same way Arizonians do. And I think that's going to be hard for her to overcome.
And does that, that Arizona issue, for example, does that make it more likely then that she might pick the Arizonan as her vice presidential nominee?
Yeah, someone like Mark Kelly, look, Mark Kelly is considered to be a moderate, and Kamala Harris needs to balance out her ticket because despite the fact that GovTracker tried to erase their rating of her as being the most liberal senator, it still stands that her record is available for us to look at. So picking someone like Mark Kelly, North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper, those are more tempered Democratic candidates that might be able to appeal to a group of voters that Kamala would not be able to get with someone like Gretchen Whitmer on her ticket. That said, has Mark Kelly done a great job fixing the border crisis? No. Has he signed onto resolutions condemning Kamala Harris? No. And I think Arizonans will remember that.
Well, indeed. And, just on that sort of, trying to balance things between the moderates and the left, there was a fascinating bit in the Biden Oval Office address where he revealed in his final months he's going to be making a big push to what he called reform the Supreme Court. Have a listen to this.
I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform.
Now, presumably this means more justices and term limits so that the left can get their way on the courts. Does this show there's still a concern about getting the left to come out and support whatever the ticket winds up being?
I think they hope that they can tie the Supreme Court and the Dobbs decision together by saying, well, if we had a different makeup of the court, abortion would not have, or Roe versus Wade would not have been turned down. That being said, what's really frightening about this is a party that claims to be, pro-freedom, pro-democracy, what have you. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78, he wrote and he warned that a judiciary that is co-opted by either the executive or the legislative branch puts every single person's rights in jeopardy. If you have the executive branch trying to create reform, which by reform he means what the things you mentioned, but also an independent commission to look over ethics at the Supreme Court, getting Congress involved. When you have that type of structure where there's now not three branches of government, but really two branches of government that both try to fight to control the third, you threaten everybody's individual liberties. And I think it's really scary that that is what they're putting on their platform right now.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And, when you go and you listen to that Kamala Harris ad, she talks about, freedom, we're the party of freedom. But it just doesn't seem like that in the same way that the Democrats don't seem to be much about democracy, given that, and I want you to explain this to our viewers here in Australia who may not know the process, but they're moving to hold a virtual nomination of Kamala Harris before the convention in order to, quote, avoid any perception of instability, unquote. That sounds pretty Soviet to me.
Yeah, so with the virtual roll call, so that was planned in May. And the reason being is because there are certain states that if you weren't already nominated by a certain point, you couldn't get on the ballot. That was a concern for Joe Biden. That doesn't preclude Democrats from still having an open virtual primary. They don't want to have that. And I think the message this sends is that for 14 million Democrats who went out and voted in our primary election this past season, they are saying your vote was perfunctory. You can vote for whoever you want. But at the end of the day, if these DC elites aren't selecting the person, then it doesn't matter. So it's selection over election. And so they can cry about democracy all they want. But when you tell 14 million voters to go kick rocks, you have no leg to stand on.
Well, exactly right. And, they say, democracy is at stake, and the only way to save democracy is to vote for our candidate. Doesn't sound very democratic. Brianna Lyman, thank you so much. Check out her stuff on the Federalist. She's got a great piece on how Joe Biden shouldn't be allowed to stay in office if he's not able to run for office.